Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I just clicked the record button and I'm trying to remember your name.
Maddie.
Sorry, can you tell me your name?
Yeah, so my name's Madeline or Maddie, whatever
Okay,
whatever
I'll go
sticks.
with Maddie then. Oh, hi Maddie, how are you? How are you doing today?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm doing fine. The weather is better today. It's not so hot, so it's just
Yeah.
calm.
Yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah. Okay. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Maddie, as I just said. I'm a cardiac science STP in my second year, and I'm based out of Cambridge at Addenbrooke's Hospital, and I'm doing the university portion of my degree at Newcastle University.
No. Okay. Then, what about your background before the STP?
So before the STP, I came straight out of my undergraduate degree. So I did a bachelor's degree in biomedical science at the University of Guelph, which is in Ontario, Canada, which is where
Oh,
I'm from. Well, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, but was in Cambridge, Ontario beforehand.
that means you're
I
Canadian.
am Canadian, yes.
Did you come to the UK because of the STP?
In part, yes. So the STP was sort of what brought me over at this time, but I do have lots of family here. So all of my aunts and uncles are in the UK.
How are you finding it here?
Yeah, it's good. I know people complain about the weather, but I think the weather is better here than in Canada.
Oh, it's better here than in Canada. Oh, wow, that's cool. That's very interesting to know. Okay, then how are you finding the STP?
Yeah, I think it's really fulfilling. It's really interesting. It is a lot of work, and obviously there are lots of sort of moving parts, and there isn't a lot like a huge amount of downtime. It's a lot of like, at least with second year, you have the research, you have the competencies, you have the university work, and then you also have a 9 to 5 job in addition to all of that.
But for the research work that you are doing, how are you finding it? Is it taking most of your time or something? But how are you finding it?
I'd say at this point it is not taking up most of the time. At the moment, the competencies are probably taking up most of my priorities, but the research project is sort of just like in the proposal stages, at least in second year. So I have just submitted like a huge 20-page project proposal, and that's just the proposal. So while that's sort of waiting to get some feedback, I haven't really done much with the research because I don't want to get a bunch of feedback and actually, well, I don't like my idea at all. So yeah, at least in second year, the research, at least in my experience, hasn't been like a huge amount of it, but I'm sure that'll change in third year.
So for your topic, did you pick it yourself or it got assigned to you at work or something?
So when I started the STP, I sort of already knew that my focus would be on like congenital pediatric cardiology. So I was put in touch with a pediatric cardiologist, and she was working on or starting a project. I thought that sounded really interesting, and she asked if I wanted to come on board. And I was like, yes, I'll do it. So I had like a general idea, at least, of the topic, but then the actual specifics of the research project was sort of assigned to me.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering, since your undergrad was in biomedical science and now you're training in cardiac science,
Yes.
is this something you've always wanted to do, or at what point did you decide that you wanted to apply to cardiac science?
So I feel like I've probably known my whole life that I wanted to have a career in cardiology in some way. When I was 3, I had Kawasaki disease, which is a pediatric cardiac disease. It's the leading cause of acquired heart disease in children. And so I've sort of always like grown up around it. My mom has a cardiac condition, so I was just always sort of really into cardiac science, into cardiology. And then I sort of did the STP by chance. I wanted to move to the UK anyway, and I was Googling like UK cardiac jobs, and I found the STP, and the applications were opening like a week after I had discovered it. So it felt like fate. I thought, you know what,
Yeah.
I'll apply, and then it worked out. So yeah,
Wow.
just by chance, really.
Are you sure it's by chance? Probably you
Yeah.
put a strong application. So that means you applied to the STP once and you got
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you do anything differently to prepare an outstanding application, or you just applied, or how did that work out for you?
So when it came to my application, I did have like work experience in healthcare. So I had worked over like the summer and during my like last degree of my undergraduate degree at like a cardiology clinic. And I'd also worked at like a community health center. So when I was writing my application, I used those experiences working in healthcare to frame it. But I did also sort of talk about my experiences as a patient in
Okay.
healthcare. So I sort of wrote my application from both perspectives. So working in healthcare and being a patient in healthcare. And that's sort of how I formulated my application.
Well, that sounds really unique. Yeah, yeah, because I said that because I just finished one of my professional practice training activity that said we should explore the journey of a patient through the care in our organization. So
Yeah.
I tried to like put myself in the shoes of a patient. So yeah, and yeah, writing that up, I kind of understand, kind of try to be a patient. And for you, writing up your STP application from the side of a patient and as an applicant, yeah, I think that make a lot of sense. Then talking about cardiac science, what's your specialty about? I don't know. I have a thing about cardiac science specifically. I think it's something I might like. I kind
Yeah.
of sounds really interesting. So yeah, can you tell us about your specialty?
Yeah, so cardiac science is sort of divided into like two subcategories. There's non-invasive cardiac science and invasive cardiac science. In non-invasive cardiac science, it's sort of based on like diagnostics. So they're often like the first point of contact for diagnosing cardiac conditions or sort of doing like serial checks on cardiac conditions. So that means like echocardiograms, which are those ultrasound scans of the heart. It could be stress tests, which are like exercise tests on a treadmill. It could even be something like an ECG. So those are all sort of diagnosing those heart conditions and checking up on heart conditions. And then there's also the invasive aspect of cardiac science. And so that's sort of primarily surrounding pacemakers. So we have a role in programming pacemakers. We choose the settings for the patient. We are in the cath lab putting those pacemakers in the patients. We also work in the lab in like angiograms, and in some hospitals they do electrophysiology, so that's like ablations and stuff like that for arrhythmias, also stents. One of my favorite things is the pacemaker clinics. So we'll run these clinics where patients come in to see us and they obviously have a pacemaker fitted, and we take their history, we take their symptoms, and we just have a little iPad and we're able to control their pacemaker and change their heart rate just from an iPad. And while they're sitting there, we're changing how fast their heart is going. We're changing basically how their heart is functioning. And it can alleviate so many symptoms. You know, you have people that aren't able to walk because their exercise capacity is so reduced. They're so symptomatic. And then with an iPad and some numbers, we can give that person their life back. And it's fascinating.
Wow. Wow, that sounds really interesting. Then for your first year, because now you said you have two parts, the diagnostic and the invasive. So I'm sure you get to rotate through all of them. So do you start going through the two parts in your first year, or what do you get to do in your first year? And maybe now that you're in second year, what kind of stuff did you get to do?
So with first year, I know this kind of varies depending on the hospitals. Some people are sort of like from the get-go, they are either invasive or non-invasive. At least for me, in my first year, I was sort of rotating between the two. Primarily non-invasive. I was sort of learning like everything. I was learning how to do an ECG. You know, I was learning the basics in my first year, and it was a lot of observing. In second year, there's a lot more reliance on me as like a member of staff. So I'm running those pacemaker clinics. You know, I'm making those changes on the pacemaker. So like looking back at first year, it's like I was scared to do an ECG, and now I'm running a pacemaker clinic and I'm changing someone's pacemaker. So yeah, it definitely changes a lot from first year to second year. And at the end of second year, you're meant to make your decision where you choose non-invasive or invasive. And then
So
third
what?
year specific.
Yeah, with your love for pacemaking, I think you're going for invasive, right? Okay, so for your first year, what external rotations do you do?
So we have obviously the cardiac ones, invasive, non-invasive. There's also respiratory rotations and vascular rotations.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So since your role is patient facing, for me, my role is non-patient facing. So how are you finding interacting directly with patients is an experience I don't really have much of. Because of course we work in the lab, we rarely get to see patients. So what is it like having that one-on-one interaction with patients?
I think that is probably, for me, the most fulfilling part of the role. I love interacting with the patients. That's sort of where I'm in my element when I'm with patients. I love just like talking to patients, hearing about how they're feeling and how sort of what we're doing is improving their care. Yeah, I love working with the patients. I mean, I think that's why the STP is so interesting, because if you're someone that doesn't necessarily like that, you can work in a lab and be happy and be an incredibly important part of the NHS, or you can be talking to patients every day, and it's so varied. It's quite cool.
Yeah. Then talking about running a clinic yourself now, how long did it take you to grow that confidence of running a clinic yourself? Did it take long, maybe running the clinic alongside your trainers or your seniors? Or at what point did you develop that confidence of running a clinic and staying alone with patients?
When I was thinking about this, I was like, I don't know if I'm more confident now, but actually, if I, as I was saying, when I look back on first year, I was scared to do an ECG. So actually, the confidence really has improved, and I think that sort of happened through being just sort of thrown into it. I think I grew my confidence by doing. So I wasn't going to gain confidence by just observing and observing and observing.
Yeah.
I needed to be thrown into it and just told to do it, and just that's how I gained the confidence. And obviously that happens gradually.
Yeah.
You're not going to come on your first day and just say, run this pacemaker clinic.
Of course.
It happens gradually, but yeah, I just needed to be thrown into it. Just do it. Stop observing. Just do.
That's one thing about the STP. Yesterday at work, is this test that we do, and the microscope kind of is similar to a fluorescence microscope. I've seen microscopes in other rotations, but this one was kind of different. And they asked me to try it out. I was like, I don't want to break anything. I was so scared. So yeah, talking about the confidence growing. I think when they start you up on it gently, then I don't know, at some point you might get used to it then. Okay, then I wanted to ask again specifically, what kind of conditions do you guys? I know cardiac condition, heart conditions, but specifically, I don't know if it applies to your specialty as well, because I know that for us, we have cancers, we have different kind of cancers and all that. So specifically, what kind of heart conditions do you guys diagnose and treat in your trust?
So yeah, there's tons of cardiac conditions that we deal with. So this may be interesting to you, but we run like a cardio oncology service. Patients that are undergoing cardiotoxic chemotherapy, we'll do like serial echo scans of them just to check that chemotherapy isn't harming their heart. And I'd say the most common conditions we're diagnosing would probably be, from the non-invasive side, would be like heart failure, valvular issues, so that's like regurgitations and stenosis. When it comes to invasive, that's not so much diagnostic, but I guess if you think about like angiograms, that's like narrowing of the arteries and plaque development in the arteries. So these are patients that have had heart attacks, or they're suspected to have had heart attacks. And with pacemakers, usually it's patients that have really low pulses, and that makes them really symptomatic. It can potentially even cause sudden death. So that pacemaker or that implantable cardiac defibrillator is really, really important. We see lots and lots and lots of atrial fibrillation. That is probably the most common thing that we see. And that's in non-invasive and invasive. That is a very, very common condition. But yeah, we see kind of everything.
Yeah, so while I was working in the hospital, I've seen some patient that had kind of a monitor attached to their heart. Is that what you mean by pacemaking?
Was it like an external?
Yeah, like an external monitor, and then they monitor their heart from the cardiac center, but they can stay on the ward with, I don't know, something like that.
So the external one, that's probably just like a Holter monitor or an event monitor. So that can record the heart rate heart rate and rhythm over a 24-hour to 72-hour period. We then take that device off and we analyze it. We look at their ECG, so their rhythm. throughout that period, and we analyze it and we look for any irregularities. We write a report on it. There's also the event recorders, so that can be like weeks at a time, and that only records if there's something particularly irregular or if the patient presses a button when they're symptomatic. There's also implantable loop recorders, so those are a bit like Holter monitors, but they're actually inserted into a little pocket under the skin, and those are continuously recording, and those are for years at a time. And then the pacemaker itself is, so we cut a little pocket into the chest that goes in, and then there are usually 2 or 3 leads that go into the actual heart, and they send electrical signals to the heart to control how it beats, so that can change sort of the rate. Usually it changes the rate. There are other aspects to it, but that's sort of, if someone has like a really low heart rate, we're able to increase it. There's also implantable cardiac defibrillators, so it's a bit like a pacemaker, except it has an additional lead which can deliver a shock if that patient goes into a dangerous arrhythmia, and we need to get them out of that dangerous arrhythmia because that can cause death.
Well, that's a lot. That's actually a lot, and that sounds really interesting. Therefore, clinical scientists within your specialty, I know that there might be other healthcare scientists that also work within your specialty. So specifically, if you're asked what the role of a clinical scientist, because I know that most of the applicants and people that are watching our videos, they will always want to know specifically if they're asked what the role of a clinical scientist is, what they should say. So can you talk us through what the role of a clinical scientist in cardiac science is?
Yeah, so we're the people performing those diagnostic tests in non-invasive, so we're the ones doing those echocardiograms or running stress tests. In the invasive side, that's those, like the cardiac scientists, the clinical scientists are the ones programming the pacemakers. We're in the lab. We're monitoring the patient when they're getting that pacemaker inserted. We're making those real-time programming changes in the lab. In the angiograms, we're also in the lab. We're monitoring the patient. We're looking at the data that comes from that catheter. So yeah, we're everywhere. We're doing lots.
Oh yeah, you guys have a lot you're doing there. Okay, then let's get back to the STP application again. So as someone who applied first time, you've mentioned that you had a summer experience before applying to the STP. So how did you find the situational judgment test, and how did you find the interview as well?
So the situational judgment test, I remember looking up like an example on the Pearson website, and I think that should still be available, and I found that really helpful. That sort of just, obviously the questions aren't going to be the same, but it just sort of let me know what I was to be expecting. But I didn't think it was something that I should be studying for because it's meant to be my judgment. So I wanted to familiarize myself with the type of questions, but I wasn't going to religiously study for it. I wanted to go in there with my like authentic judgment, and that's sort of how I took that on, and I kind of enjoyed it. And the interview, so with that, I don't know if it's changed now, but I think it was like only me that was interviewed, and it was basically just to confirm.
Yeah. I think you're in second year, right? So yeah, your interview was not competitive, but for us, our interview was competitive.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess even though mine wasn't competitive, I still sort of did some like research before the interview. I wanted to make sure I knew like the pillars of the NHS. So I also looked at like stuff that was specific to my trust. So my trust has like some key words, some key phrases that are really important. So I made sure I knew all about those. I looked into like research and projects that my hospital was doing, so I could ask some questions about it to the interviewers. I think that's really important, is, use that opportunity to ask them questions, show that you're interested, show that you're knowledgeable, not just about the specialty, but about the actual hospital. And then I also just sort of looked at just general research that was up and coming in cardiac science. And I just made sure that I was well informed about the NHS, cardiac science, and the hospital were like my main things.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Then now as a trainee, you're, I know you said you've submitted your proposal, and I know in third year, you're going to get into doing your dissertation. You have the competencies, you have the university and all that. So how are you balancing everything? And of course, managing your personal life as well?
That's a great question. So I think for me, it's really important that I make sure I keep time to myself. So that means I keep my work at work. I keep my competencies and university work to my study days, or, to like sort of downtimes at work. And then I make sure that I have my weekends. I need those to sort of relax and, keep sane. Like I do lots of running, and I need that running to keep me sane, to keep me, it's really important for my mental health that I have that time to myself. And I think you'll hear that from a lot of people, is that work-life balance is super important. And it probably seems tempting because at least, with like my undergrad, I would often do like university work over the weekends, and it seems like you should just be continuously studying and working and getting everything done, but you need that time to yourself, because this is also a job. You're working 9 to 5, you're doing all these things, you need time to yourself.
Yeah. So that makes sense, because the STP is 3 years. So if you go on and on working over the weekend and all that. So for me, I also try to keep competencies and like just keep work to work, and then keep my own personal time, because I also got a family. I've got a little girl. So if I focus everything on the STP, then maybe when I'm done with the STP, then she'll be all grown, and I wouldn't have spent enough time with her. So I think it's very important that we find that balance. So you keep work stuff to work, then so you also have your personal time to keep things together. So what's a day in your life like, or a week in your life? So what kind of, do you guys study day each week, and what kind of things do you get to do on daily basis as a trainee clinical scientist?
So my sort of day-to-day changes. It's not always the same thing. So like when I'm in invasive cardiac science, I always have a set study day. It's always going to be Fridays, which is quite nice. It helps me plan. But my day, it can change. Like I go in the morning, and I don't really know what I'm going to do that day. It changes all the time. But so I could be doing like ward rounds. So if a patient or a patient with an implantable defibrillator has received a shock, then we're going to go down to the emergency, and we're going to check on that patient and see what happened. So we look at the pacemaker, we look at the data, and we see why they received that shock, what heart rate and heart rhythm they went into, and see if that was like an appropriate shock. Because we've had it where patients are in an inappropriate rhythm, so it's a rhythm that should not have received a shock, and they've received a shock, and now they're in the emergency when they shouldn't have been. So, that's, or we could be, as I said, running a clinic where we're just sort of checking up on those pacemakers, we're checking up on their symptoms, or we could be in the cath lab the whole day and supporting those pacemaker insertions, supporting those angiograms. There's also implantable loop recorders, so it may be we're just sort of on a computer looking at the results from implantable loop recorders and reporting on those, phoning patients, seeing if when they went into a particular rhythm were they symptomatic. So it's not always patient facing. Sometimes we are just on a computer reporting stuff, but most of the time it is pretty patient facing.
Okay, then for the university part, I've spoken to some STPs that say they don't take exams, they do just assignments, and they go for their lectures in blocks. So what's your university experience like, and how often do you attend?
So first year we went up for 6 weeks at the beginning of the year. Yeah, that was quite a long time. And then 2 more weeks later in the year, and then went up for like a week of exams. And throughout that time there were some like various assignments due. And then in second year we went up for 2 weeks at the beginning of the year, 1 week later in the year, and then we had 1 exam, and that was it. And then various assignments throughout. So I'd say second year feels more assignment based, but it's not too many trips to university really.
Okay, yeah, of course, it's just a part-time master, so I'm not expected to be in the university for long. So, looking back before you started the STP, what is one thing you wish you knew before getting on the STP?
I think I wish I knew that there's going to be highs and lows in the job, and it's not always going to be me performing world-changing, groundbreaking things. I'm not always going to be doing something amazing and interesting. There is going to be mundane things I need to do. There is going to be monotony. So yeah, there are definite highs and lows, and I think I also wish I knew that the work-based learning, it's not like my undergraduate degree. There isn't structured training and teaching. So at the workplace, at your hospital, what you're expected to learn, what you're expected to know, and what you're taught is very, very dependent on the people that are training you and the people that you work with. So I think that's just something to be aware of, that it's not going to be like, at least for me, coming right out of my undergraduate degree, it is not going to be like that. It's very different. It's very unique.
Okay, so since you had that experience, what did you do differently to maybe overcome that?
The what, sorry?
Okay, so the experience of the training not being like your undergrad, because I know that people that are coming out from their undergrad, most of them, all they have is their university experience, and being faced with the workplace reality of your training, depending on your trainers, and because I know that as a trainee, you have a lot of responsibility to look at your training activities and determine, okay, I need to watch this, I need to watch that. So at the point where you realize that your training is different from being an undergraduate, what did you do differently to kind of get into it?
I think learning how to sort of teach myself and, use lots of like self-guided teaching was really important, because while there isn't necessarily structured learning in the workplace, there are obviously those competencies that can guide that learning. And at least in my experience, I often had to sort of remind the teams that I was working with that, well, I need to get this competency done, so I need to learn this. So there is a lot of like self-advocacy, because sometimes the people that you're working with don't know what your competencies are. So you sort of are forced to learn to sort of speak up for yourself and be an advocate and use that confidence to say, I need to learn this. So that was a bit of a learning curve, but yeah, it's definitely all sort of down to building that confidence. That's probably like an important part of being a clinical scientist is, speaking up for yourself and saying what you need, basically.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the, excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, I think also that's part of the communication skills that we need to build as clinical scientists, being able to speak up for yourself and for your training. I spoke with the biochemistry STP, and just like you said, the responsibility you have of looking at your training activities and knowing what you need to learn. Because if you are there and you don't speak up, some of the people that are training you, they are not even STP, so they don't even understand that we have training activities that we need to write up. So sometimes you have to come in, you look at what you have, then you say, oh, I need to watch this, I need to watch that, and they kind of direct you to the right staff. They've actually been very helpful, and I've found most of the staff to be very supportive. So if you speak to someone and they're not able to do that for you, they can direct you to the right person to speak up. So yeah, I think those coming into the SCP should, if they are shy or if they're not able to speak up for themselves, I think they might struggle on the STP. So yeah, everyone coming into the STP should be able to develop their communication skills, as well as, just like you said, being able to advocate for themselves. Yeah. So I agree with you. That works well. Okay, so yeah, I know new STPs will be coming in this September. So what advice do you have for them?
I would say try and talk to somebody that's at your hospital that already works there, because they're going to know the team and the environment the best. So reach out to them if you can. Look on, when I was applying, there was like a Discord, so like a group chat. I don't know if that's still a thing, but
yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah.
I was on Discord.
There you go. I found it super helpful. I was able to find trainees at my hospital, and one of them even helped me find a place to rent locally. So I think try and find your community before you even start, and reach out, make those connections. You'll find that connections and networking is really, really important. So do it early, crack on, but also enjoy your summer. Don't start trying to do competencies or researching like crazy now. But start. No, I don't think there's any issue with starting to network and starting to communicate and coming in well informed. But make sure you take that time for yourself.
Yeah, I think that part of enjoy the summer is a good advice, because when you start the STP, no one is going to push you to start doing things. They're gonna take you into it slowly. Like me, when I started reading SOPs, trust values, and doing a lot of paperwork. Those times that you just sit there reading and reading and reading. So yeah, you guys should enjoy your summer. I think you're going to have enough time to get and settle into the STP properly. Yeah. Then as someone that got into the STP straight from their undergrad, what advice would you give to applicants? What advice would you give to those applying to your specialty next January?
Like cardiac science specifically.
Yeah, cardiac science. I don't know, what advice would you give them to make their application stand out?
Okay, yeah, so yeah, when it comes to writing the application, what I did was, once again, I don't know if it's still a thing, but there's like a person specification.
Yeah.
So what I did is I literally used that like a checklist. So as I was writing my application, I picked my experiences and made sure that it aligned with that person's specification. And I went down and I checked each little bit to make sure I had all of it. And I don't think that necessarily means you need to go out and start doing heart surgery, trying to get the experience. You can turn anything into relevant. You can make anything relevant to the person's specification. So if you worked at a grocery store or you were a barista, use that to talk about your communication skills. Use that to talk about how you're good with patients. You can sort of change anything to fit that application. But my big thing was using it like a checklist. And that really helped me.
That's a great advice. Thank you very much for giving that. So yeah, I think that's all the questions I have. And I'm really grateful that you agreed to do this with me. So thank you very much. And before I forget, I really like your background. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should have told you when we started, but I keep peeping at the flowers and everything. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I really appreciate your time and thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you for having me.